competing with the 6 o'clock news.
I know. Well, there's only one channel to compete against now, right?
I think that they're still doing one on 3. It's
Oh,
half an hour condensed down.
okay, nice.
Yeah.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining tonight's webinar. We will kick off in probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. I'm joined by Tom Hartman and Luke Cummings. Gents, you want to do a little intro for yourselves?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. No doubt there'll be some Keep the Change attendees, which is good. And they hopefully will be familiar with me, but I host the Keep the Change podcast. I'm a chartered accountant by trade, so dealing with small business owners throughout the week, and then have a bit of a passion to give some of that education back to everyday Kiwi people so they can learn more and improve their financial situation. That will then give us a better country and a better economy, and the whole boat will just go a bit faster.
How bloody patriotic.
Yeah.
I feel better being here. And off to you, Tom.
Love it. Yeah. Great to be here with you all. So I'm Tom Hartman. I'm the personal finance lead for Sorted, and it's Sorted Money Month. So welcome to Sorted Money Month, where the theme is pause, get sorted. So this is a way of pausing and just talking about personal finance a bit and taking that moment. And I love pausing because it also protects people from scams where they can just stop for a second and just check if it's the real deal or not.
Yeah, also in the middle of winter, it's nice to pause for a second, take a little break. And I am James Blair. I'm a financial advisor, host Checks and Balances, podcast with my very close friend, Michael Vincent, who is not here tonight, but you boys will keep me company instead. Just to make sure everybody can hear us, very easy question in the chat to kick us off. Where in the country are you based?
Anyone from Dannyburg? Great town.
I'd love for Danny
Awesome.
back.
Yeah.
Greytown?
Surely.
Maybe we get somebody from Greytown.
That's right. Maybe so.
Yeah.
Anyone from Harvard or Dannyburg? That's what I'm looking out for.
There,
There is someone from Great Town.
are we believing that? Do you know Jack?
Yeah, good.
Awesome. Okay.
That's awesome.
And how are we going time-wise? 6:01. All right, we'll just give another minute or two before we kick it off. Tom, coming back to pause for a second. What do you think about that theme of pause? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, we've seen some really good things come out of this theme. And one, I think, is just making better financial decisions overall. Like, you need a moment to just stop and find some. In fact, we've got a great excuse generator on Sorted. My favorite is my cat's in a neighborhood scandal, so I can't, to make any excuse you can to just take a moment and pause. And I really like, sometimes I even, tell people, hey, before you're going to make that financial decision, go walk around the block before you're going to buy something. Just interrupt the circuit somehow. And so pausing is really powerful.
Yeah, in terms of like the excuse generator, I don't know if it sits in the excuse generator, but I know you're just talking to us before we jumped on around what's stopping people from investing that you post, and you got some interesting responses there, didn't you?
Yeah, so many people. I was blown away at how many people don't know how or don't know where to start, just with the amount of resources. But obviously we live in this world, so it's probably second nature for us. And, some people message them like, wow, these people, obviously don't like listen to the content and whatnot. But hey, I think it's a good theme as well to pause and think, okay, what's something that you're procrastinating on when it comes to your finances, and maybe just tick that off. And for everybody, they're going to be at a different stage of their journey, but that's okay. But let's all take one thing in this month and sort of money month and think, right, okay, that's the thing that I'm actually going to get sorted. And then it's done.
It's a snowball effect, right? Like you take one step and then the next step and the next step, and you turn around 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years and you're like, holy crap, look how far I've come.
It's definitely been my journey as well, and it's so easy now to look back and to tell people to do that. But it does suck when you are in credit card debt thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be a millionaire and one day I'm going to have shares and do all this cool stuff. And you're like, okay, I need to pay my credit card back. But literally that is the start. That is your start line. And then you have to just actually start taking action to do that, because you don't want to be there. And so then that is your starting point.
Yeah.
And then eventually you break the back of that, and then you're into the next thing, and then the next thing.
And there's always something you can do.
Yeah.
There is always something that you can tweak or hack or something like that in order to make your situation that much better.
Yeah. People always want to take the shortcuts and take the big steps, but it's about the small consistent steps. Okay. So We are going to kick it off with a couple of poll questions. The poll questions, don't worry, they don't go anywhere. We just want to get a little bit of an idea of kind of who in general is joining us tonight, just so we can tailor it a little bit. Gents, it is 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I want to make this not a dry finance chat. I want to try and make this let's go off the rails. Let's have some fun. Let's see where this goes. The Q&A, let's get questions in the Q&A. So we'll talk for maybe 30, 40 minutes. Ravi will tell us to wrap it up. Ravi's in the background as well. So give some love to Ravi for organizing this whole thing, because Luke couldn't even get here on time because the subway was running late.
True story. You put vodka in my drink.
Yeah, I did. I know how we get the best version of you out here. So tonight we're doing 5 steps to grow your wealth. We're just going to have a chat and then questions as we go. Ravi, how are these poll questions looking? Okay, in terms of age bracket, pretty even split. So pretty much half are between 30 and 40, and the rest are kind of a little bit up, a little bit below. Interestingly, pretty much exactly a 50-50 split between those who own their home and those who do not. So there's probably quite a few thinking about 7% interest rates on their mortgage, seeing interest rates maybe starting to come down a little bit. The OCR chat, only 20% have an investment property, which is interesting to know. 80%, Luke, are invested in the share market. I wonder if they're thinking about their KiwiSaver as well. Mm-hmm. And my goodness, Luke is a popular man. 57% of you have come from Keep the Change.
Very cool.
Oh, good.
And how are you feeling about your finances, which I think is quite a interesting one. So obviously we're in a recession, times are tough. 13% not good at all. 70% okay, and 17% of you, which is awesome, feeling great. Do those results, Luke, in terms of how people are feeling, does that?
Could we pull those back up quickly? So 13% not good at all.
Yeah.
And then
70% okay, and 17% feeling great.
That definitely does not match the general population. Like in our surveys, we're seeing that more than half of us, about 57% of us, are in some serious discomfort. So really glad that our group here is doing that much better.
Yep, definitely. So let's jump into the content for the evening. So a little bit about Lighthouse for those, apparently quite a few don't know about Lighthouse. So let me tell you about Lighthouse. So for those who don't know, we are in the Lighthouse office right now. All of the accountants, mortgage brokers, financial advisors, they've all gone home, but we're still here. So we believe at Lighthouse, education, which is what tonight's about, plus action, plus some time is an important component, equals financial freedom over the long term. Pretty much learning about your money, because you're working for somebody else, making somebody else wealthy. You need to understand what you're doing, taking consistent steps to get ahead. That's what we believe here at Lighthouse. By the numbers, so Lighthouse, this is like a bit of a vanity slide. I think we've got a couple of these because there is a little bit of vanity going around here. So we've got a lot of clients across the country. We've helped people buy a lot of properties. We've got some funds under management. Rather, we need to update those funds under management number. Doing me dirty on that one.
Oh yeah, what should the number be?
Oh, 500. Yeah, that's right. Chuck a 0 on the end.
Yeah.
The disclaimer, which you gents might be interested, might not be, and as the financial advisor, I'm certainly very interested. This is not personalized financial advice. Yes, it is also, I will remind you both, a recorded webinar. So I think you're going to chuck this out here to the Keep the Change audience as well.
Yeah, I'm a little unsorted too.
Yeah. So this is not personalized advice. We're talking in general terms. If you want, at the end of this, we're going to go if you want to have a chat with a mortgage broker or financial advisor, book a time to have a chat. Also use the comment section, but yeah, everybody's situation is different.
Sure is.
Okay, so the plan for tonight. So this is our agenda. So essentially, what would you call this, Tom? Would you go, it's about just taking small steps before we start running?
It's like a roadmap.
Yeah, it is a roadmap. Yeah, it's a good way to think about a plan, actually, as it's really just a route to getting where you need to go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people jump straight to the end. They want to do the cool stuff. Mm-hmm. They want to invest into shares. They want to buy houses. They want to start businesses. But then the foundations aren't there. And Luke, I don't know if you can talk about this from like a business advisory perspective, but if you don't have good foundations, as soon as things get a little bit rocky, while you might have a great business or a great property or have some good investments, it can all fall apart pretty quickly if you don't have the right infrastructure behind you.
Yeah, well, what's been really interesting in this last sort of cycle, and as things have become trickier, as some of our business owner clients, their incomes have decreased because it's just harder out there. Now, that's the same for a lot of us, is that our incomes can fluctuate, but normally if we're an employee, we're hoping that it's increasing, but also business owners too. But also some of these people have rental properties, and it's like they've almost jumped ahead of a step where they haven't ensured that their business is profitable and sorted that stream of income to then be able to look after the rental, and kind of gone, oh, debt's been cheap, I can do this, I can get a tenant in. And so they've kind of missed a little bit of the journey in the middle to really make sure that this business does well and can actually help pay for that rental when interest rates are a bit higher. So it's been interesting. I've actually seen a few people sell them when that probably was never part of the plan, but because they haven't been able to shore up the income,
to sell,
they've had to then let go of an asset to then basically go, well, we'll have to try and have a go at getting that back in the future. So I think it's exciting, like you said before, to jump to the end and go, right, we're getting into this investment or whatnot. But if you aren't figuring out what your difference is between your income and your expenses, and then what can change, then sometimes the plan has to change too, right?
Yeah. And essentially, this is the plan that we would take all of our clients through at Lighthouse. My job all day is building financial plans. Tom, I'd be keen to hear like what you're seeing it sorted, but one thing I'm seeing a lot is just feeling that all Kiwis are very short-sighted. So we're in tough times right now. And sometimes it's very hard to think tough times will last forever. And then we'll swing back to the good times. And then we'll, go, oh, good times will last forever. We'll take more risk. We'll finance that car. We'll, buy the new couch and put that at 30% on a gym visa or whatever. What are you seeing at sorted at the moment in terms of like, that kind of short-sightedness that maybe the pain will.
I think it comes along with being human, actually, that short-termism and how the short-term tends to drown out anything long-term. But what we're seeing now actually is, because of the current climate, is people are more engaged with their finances, and they're not just engaged with what's going on now and trying to get through. They're actually still staying engaged for the long term as well. So it's a really good climate actually to get people to think about the long term. These steps that we'll run through here today are pretty much the steps that we walk people through on Sorted when they're like, hey, just tell me what to do. I want to sort out my finances. These are pretty much them. We add, actually run your numbers for the long term to see what you're on track to achieve as well. But pretty much this is it. And so people can take this opportunity when we're all sort of focusing on our financial lives to really actually run those long-term numbers as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty much giving away all the secrets tonight. There's nothing to hide or particularly special about what a financial advisor does. It's about just the accountability, the plan, the consistency, bit of marriage counseling in there as well. So let's jump into the 5 steps. Point 1 is about setting up an emergency fund. So your emergency fund will cover the unexpected things in life. As I'm sure for both of you, something has gone wrong at some point in your life. And if you don't have some cash set aside, it makes a tough situation a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even this year for me, I've had a CT scan. So by the time I got like in and out of that whole process, $2,000 gone. And for not that long ago for me, that would have been so stressful. And my mind would have gone to, I'm probably going to finance this. I'm going to figure out who takes a Q card or whatnot. But now, because I've gone through some of these steps, I'm basically, and as well, I probably would have put it off and gone like, is it that important? I don't know if I'm going to do it. Now I'm like, okay, I need to go do that, close the loop, pay the money. It can come out of my emergency fund and I can build that back up. And, that's 2 very different versions of me that I've been able to live through. As one would have financed it or ignored it. And then now, okay, this is what this is here for.
Yeah. What would you say, Luke, in terms of like you say, 2 different versions of yourself that handle the situation differently? Say if there's people on this call who are in that previous version where they would go, I'm just on the Q card. What has to change in terms of mindset to be able to go, no, I do need to save that emergency fund and I need to stay away from this bad debt?
Well, I think that you only start thinking about an emergency fund once you have an emergency. So I think that's when people start learning about it. And then they go, oh, well, I wish I had one. But you then, once you tidy your finances up as well and stack an emergency fund, I think then you're like, oh, there's no emergencies. This is fine. But eventually something comes where it's the new tires or something happens to the car. I was walking through the gym car park this morning and someone's car was broken down and someone was putting it on the back of a truck or it was being repossessed. I don't know. But, but instantly my brain goes to, oh, well, hopefully like that's not going to completely ruin their week and they've got some funds. But yeah, I think you've got to decide that you don't want to live like that, where you are living in fear of, something could go wrong, but you can't look after yourself. And then just trying to feel what it would be like to be so free to know that you could just pay for that and it's not going to create the anxiety for you. It's very freeing.
Yeah. Financial.
The key thing with this one is this is the starter emergency fund, right? This is just sock away $1,000. Like my mind goes right away to the emergency trip to the vet. I mean, we have 3 dogs at home and that can happen on any given day. But this is just to get started. It's not like a fully funded emergency fund. This is just sell whatever you have around the house, do whatever you can just to sock away that $1,000 to have that cash around.
Yeah, and Tom, why would you say only save $1,000 as a starting point? Like, if you've got that high interest debt, why should we not save up more of an emergency fund before we focus on the high interest debt?
So what ends up happening is that if you start, for example, with trying to tackle that high interest debt, is that emergencies still end up going and happening. And so you end up whacking it on, for example, a credit card or something like that. And then you end up never getting really. So having this to start with before we get to a fully funded emergency fund really helps people get going.
Awesome.
One thing to add, I think it's quite achievable. I know that for a lot of people, they were like $1,000 is still a lot of money, especially if you're at zero or in debt. But $1,000, if you can tick it off, then you've got to win pretty quickly, and then the snowball rolls. And someone messaged me this afternoon just before I got here. I've recently started a little side hustle and made over $1,600 in just 3 weeks. So they might pay $600 tax on that, but they're left with $1,000. So they've done it in 3 weeks. And it just made me think of you and all the encouragement of finding multiple income streams. They are out there. You just need to be looking. And that's the bit that a lot of people don't understand, is that once you set a goal, then your brain is like, right, I'll help you figure this out. And then you start seeing the opportunities. But when you are thinking, I'll worry about an emergency fund next year, or I'll never save, 6 months of my income, that's way too hard, then your brain isn't looking for the solutions. But if you can find a nice, simple goal to tick off, then I think you realize, well, the snowball can move a lot faster than you realize.
It's building a positive relationship with money, right? And it's like in all aspects of your life, you need to start talking to yourself in a positive manner that you can achieve these things, that you do have the ability to work this out, to take the small step forward. It's not about taking 1,000 steps forward. It's that small step. So that's step 1. Ravi, if we move to step 2, I was just about to get up. I don't know where he's going. Step 2, high interest debt. You should focus on clearing any high interest debt. This is personal loans, car loans, lay-bys, afterpay. Gents, why is it important to stay away from high interest debts?
Tom, what do you tell people, mate? Because mine's probably quite rash.
What I've been thinking about lately is if you put something, for example, on a credit card or a store card. I was looking today and like they're still hovering. I can't believe they're this high, actually. So credit cards hovering at 20%. Store cards hovering just under 30%. 30%. That means if you don't pay it back and hold it, for example, for a year, you've just given them license to basically tack 30% on anything you buy. Every $100 you buy, that's $30 that doesn't go to you. And it's just incredible how stubbornly high those things are. And so that's why this is a priority. This is where the pain is coming down.
Yeah. And coming back to the positive relationship with money, if you want a really bad relationship with money, then high interest debts are a great way to go. There is nobody who has ever taken out a car loan, a personal loan, any form of afterpay and gone, this will ruin my life. Every single person has taken that out being like, it'll be fine. I'll make the repayments. I'll pay it off early. It'll all be good. But constantly people fall into debt traps. And like Tom said, there's more and more interest costs, which makes it really hard to get out of a hole. If you have an emergency fund, there is no reason acceptable whatsoever to use these debts. If you want something, if you want a car, if you want a holiday, if you want a couch, if you want whatever, save the money before you spend it. Feel the pain of saving the money opposed to just financing it and then having to working out later, because that's not building a good relationship with money. And I don't know anybody who's financially free who's carrying, personal loans and credit cards with debt on them.
Yeah, I think a couple of things as well is that, excuse me, it's so hard to generate a return to then make sense of paying 18, 15, 20, 30% interest. Like, not many people can do that. And then you're trying to pay for that interest with after-tax income as well. So you go to work. So when you think, oh, well, it's only $30 of interest. Yeah, but it's probably 45, because by the time you make $45, pay $15 of tax, because now so much of our income is being sucked up by living costs and things like that. We're in that bottom piece of the tax bracket until we start getting pinged at basically 30% plus your KiwiSaver and whatnot. So I think we need to be thinking about actually how hard it is now to get on top of debt. But also, one thing that I think that often isn't spoken about, but these companies do so well, is once you're in their credit system, you're also in the marketing system.
Yeah.
And it's just retargeting galore. And you buy one thing, but I'd love to see some data on, okay, if someone uses XYZ card and for one thing, how many things do they actually end up buying before they clear it? Because, man, their marketing is so strong. You're into another database, and they know you're an
Afterpay is a great example, right? I mean, I'm so glad it's on this list. This is not necessarily, excuse me, high interest debt, but with Afterpay, you're totally within a marketing system. We just went through Afterpay Day, for example, and debt always brings risk to it. And one of the risks with Afterpay is that you get upsold, you get resold, you get sold over and over again.
Afterpay as a day really pisses me off. Like, shame on you for having a bloody day. Ravi, it does make me think in terms of, so we're talking about, stay away from high interest debts. There will be people who will have high interest debts. Ravi, I'll put you on the spot. Can you try and find the podcast episode we did for Money Month last year where we talked about how to pay off debts, and put that in the comment section? And for anybody in that situation, we did a podcast a day for Money Month last year, Tom. Tell you what, not doing that again. You can imagine how, we thought like, oh, it'd be fine. It was not fine.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one, Ravi. Understanding debt. So this is moving on to the same topic. So I think this is probably quite a loaded one, right? So we talk about bad debts, but on the flip side, there is opportunity cost by not using any debts. People will look at the owner-occupied mortgage, Tom, and go, what the hell is that going over there? It's been imprinted in my brain since I was this big that getting a mortgage, getting a house, my parents would be proud of me. The big thing here, good job, Ravi, for finding that episode. The big thing here is going, once you do have a mortgage on your home, that's all great, but it's not effective debt once you've got it right, and you want to knock through it. And just like the example you used, Luke, of like a 17% return, even making a 7% return after tax, fees, and inflation is very, very hard to do. So just acknowledging that we do want to clear that debt over a much shorter period of time. So we've spoken about car loans, we've spoken about credit cards, we've spoken about Afterpay. What are our thoughts on those good debts?
Well, investment mortgages in the country have always been pretty popular, right? And I think we'll start to see a move back into that space as interest rates come back down. Business debt, obviously, I'm going to be preaching for that. I think, big fan of that. And even, I've got clients that finance their tax, for instance, and if they understand what they're doing, debt can be a very good lever in our lives to help us then create more of a return that we can then speed up our growth. So I saw someone say it the other day, it's like debt can actually magnify or multiply something to the upside and to the downside. And I think it's a really good way to think about it, where, because people will tell you like debt's good or bad, but then you're still stuck. But, then someone was talking to me today and talking about how, some people will put $100 into the stock market, but then someone else will go, oh, I heard that if I go into this platform, I can put $100 in and then I can trade with $1,000 and then I'm going to make a lot more money. Yeah, but you're also going to then lose that, or could lose that as well. And that's where I think it's really important to understand like what debt you're taking on, and to then understand your emotional relationship with it too, because it could be perfectly fine for someone to go, you know what, all of the investing type stuff is too hard for me, but I would like to not have my mortgage for 30 years just because the bank said that from the start. I would like to try and clear that in 7. Well, like, great, go on that journey and just focus on that.
Yep.
And then you're probably then going to go, okay, well, what's next after that?
Yeah, for sure. I look at it's interesting you're talking about like debt can make things a lot better or a lot worse. You mentioned about, I heard from somebody I could invest $100 and get $1,000. I think because a lot of people won't go to a financial advisor. They'll talk to their parents or their friends or like a coworker or something. And it's just like, just because you like trust that person or love that person or whatever, does not mean that's the person that should be giving you financial advice. And then on the flip side, just because that advice could be right for that person, that does not make it right for that other person.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a couple and they were like, oh, we've got 2 houses, we've got a piece of land and we want to build on this house. And they had great income, but the total debt was going to be like $3 million. And I was like, they're like, the bank won't give us the money. And I'm like, good, you shouldn't take the money if they offer you the money. And they were like, well, my colleague at work said, why don't I just leverage up and borrow this? And I just calculated 3 million times 7%, 210,000 a year. I'm like, that's all of your joint household income gone.
Wow.
So I think that little bit of a sidetrack, but getting a little bit distracted. The investment property piece is good debt. So like, we're going to talk a bit about the math on investment property later. Tom, the big one that we've seen a lot of people get into trouble is they plan their life off 2 or 3% interest rates and was like, she'll be right. And then we got to 7%. And, like talking about being forced to sell investment properties,
the numbers need to make sense, right? And they don't always make sense depending on what the context, what the environment is like. And so that's the role of advice, of really running those numbers, of solving problems, of seeing some projections out. And what happens if the facts change? What happens if the reality changes that you're borrowing in?
Yeah. And then the student loans got an asterisk because, it can help you get ahead, but we all know people who've gone to uni, racked up a student loan and then done nothing. And then I'm sure there'll be somebody out there watching with a Bachelor of Arts majoring in philosophy, but very hard to get a return on investment on some of these degrees.
Yeah. And I think we also need a serious conversation in New Zealand for parents to, if their kids are thinking about studying something specifically, for the parent to go, okay, like, I'm all to support you and I want you to be doing what you love, but let's just work through this career and let's work through some of the financial side of it. Because I think we want to just go, okay, well, that's great. But then some of these kids are coming out of uni and going, oh, I'm 60G in student loan debt here. You start on 60,000, you then have 45 left or whatever. This isn't what I thought.
12% of my income away to pay this loan back forever.
And they're like, oh, I want to leave the country now because this isn't what I thought, but then I'm going to have to pay interest. And they're like, so it's almost like it's gotten a little bit out of whack, and we need to be educating students of, okay, here's probably what student debt's going to look like based on your situation.
Well, you're also saying to connect it to the career and to the earning power, that future earning power, right? That's what makes it make sense. If it affects that in a positive way. Like if it doesn't, then you end up just holding the can.
Yeah, like we've run numbers on a doctor versus a plumber in terms of earning abilities. And I think, Ravi, it was like they got to like 40 or 45 before the doctors before they broke even.
Really?
Because you think about the plumber is starting so much earlier, then their income is rising, then they don't have all of this debt, then they've got the ability to obviously there's the opportunity to start your own business, get your income up, invest into assets that pay you back an income. The doctor's not actually earning any income till 25, and then they're carrying all of that debt as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, let's move on, Ravi, to the next slide. Okay, Tom, this is probably a good one for you to talk about.
Yeah, our debt calculator is really, we put it together in order to collect all the different kinds of debts that you might be having, whether it's credit card, whether it's buy now, pay later, whether it's a car loan, put them all in and then work out a plan in order to pay them all down and figure out the fastest way that you can do that. So behind the scenes, the calculations are using the avalanche method, basically paying off the highest interest rate first and little by little whittling all of them down and you can see how any extra payments are going to get you free that much quicker.
Yeah, and if we talk about taking action, which was right at the start of this webinar, this is the perfect example of taking action. You don't have to pay off all this debt tomorrow. You go to a free calculator, you plug in your numbers, you work out a plan, and then you've taken some action, right? Like you have taken that first step. So I think that's a really powerful. There are some awesome tools on that website. I am always playing around with these to try and prove a point with clients. I'm always using these tools with clients, and they're like, "Oh, what you're saying is actually now starting to make sense." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly."
You know, I'll tell you an interesting thing. When we were designing a lot of these tools, we designed them in a way with a thought in mind. Okay, people are going to use these, and then they're going to take the results to a financial advisor and actually have a really informed conversation after they're using these tools. So it's meant to be a little bit of an on-ramp to personalized advice.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So we're going back to the boring stuff. So protecting your wealth. A lot of this sits within my camp. So we spoke about the emergency fund. Tom, we said $1,000 as a starting point, then focusing on the level of debt. What is a good size emergency fund, do you think?
Yeah. So if you think about what we're trying to protect ourselves against, and maybe, for example, redundancy, where you might have to go a few months without having a regular income. And so usually we talk about having about 3 months worth of expenses at the ready. And so that would be a fully funded emergency fund. But if you're in business for yourself, you might actually need a longer on-ramp. So it's not like one size fits all. It depends on you covering that risk yourself. So it might be 6 months of expenses that you really want to. And so this might be, a years long project, something to get up a level of emergency fund. So even if that happened, if your business goes under, that you'll be protected and ready to go.
Yeah, I know with people that are freelancing or on contracts, obviously quite a lot of concern for those in Wellington at the moment, work in the government sector, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's where you go, let's bump up that emergency fund a little bit more.
Yeah, interesting. I've got a mate of mine who, heading into the pandemic, they'd just done a stress test exercise in their business based on what would happen to this business if we had no income for 3 months. And then we hit the pandemic and they were like, oh, well, we're going to be sweet for at least the first 90 days because they'd done the exercise. And
amazing.
Yeah. And now then we've hit recession. He's like, oh, we haven't been too worried because basically like we know that we did that exercise so long ago and you know what, our full pipeline's not too bad. And I think we're also scared to do an exercise like that because we don't want to face the reality of, oh, what would that actually mean for me? But it's been so comforting for him as a business owner to then realize like, oh, okay, we could get through here. But, they're in the position to be able to do that. But I think we almost need to change the story where it's okay to dramatize some of our financial situations and stress test them to maybe use some cleaner language and then get us closer to figure out, okay, how would I get through this different situation?
I can't agree anymore with that. Like you think about that person in that situation versus like all those other business owners out there when COVID hit, and like the different I've stress tested this, we're sweet versus the amount of panic out there. And I think COVID was the perfect example, going like how bad can it be? Like, look, surely there's not going to be 3 months where I have no income. Yeah. And you're like, here's a perfect example of how like shit can hit the fan.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Really good lesson.
I think 3 years ago today, we were in lockdown, I think.
I don't want to acknowledge lockdown.
Sorry. It's crazy how the world moved.
Amazing.
Yeah. Robbie's giving me a look like I'm a conspiracy theory person. I'm not.
No,
I just want to like move forward with my life. Short-term goals. So one thing I see a lot, gents, is people have some cash and they put it into, they're going to buy their first home, or they want, they're about to have a kid, or they're going to move overseas or whatever. And they go, I'm going to put my cash into a Sharesies account or a Hatch account or something like that. That is the wrong place for your money to be. And I can give you 1,000 examples when it all goes wrong. The reason for that is if you have a short-term goal, the purpose is not to make a return. The purpose is for the money to be there when you need it to be there. And we just see time and time again where people are selfish, lazy, where they will want that immediate return. But if you're investing for the long term in property or shares, we know we're going to get a 6% return in property, 10% return in the share market. If you are investing for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, like that's the lotto. That's like, it could work out. It could go shit. Like you don't know what the potential outcome is going to be.
Yeah, I think like that's a good example in the last 48 hours, right? And I mean, sorry to A2 Milk, but anyone's seen them. So in the last 5 or 2 days, they're basically down 16.5%. Now, actually wasn't that long ago where I was reading articles like A2 milk could be on the way back up. If you get some of that secondhand info from somewhere of like, oh, someone told me just, park your money in A2 milk, that's the way to go. And then all of a sudden, next week you actually now need that cash for something. You're going to log in and then realize that, oh, wow.
Yeah.
What happened to and you're going to freak out when you see a headline too of A2 milk's down 16%.
Yeah.
So I think what you're highlighting is the danger of risking the cash that you've actually got allocated for something that shouldn't be risk on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just go down the cassie, throw it all on red, see what happens. That's just as good of a strategy.
A key question on those platforms, on those investment platforms, is what's that money for?
Yeah.
Usually it's not play money. Somebody does have a short-term goal in mind. Maybe it's like buying a car or a house deposit or something like that. So there's a mismatch is what you're talking about between the assets, what the asset is good for and what the goal is. Like if there's that mismatch, these things can happen.
Yeah. I'll also give you another one. A free hot tip. If you have a Sharesies account or a Hatch account or any shares whatsoever, and you have a personal mortgage, you just shouldn't. You should just be focused on paying off your debt before you invest. The math behind it is, say you make a 10% return, you take off 1% for fees, you're at 9, 3% for tax, you're at 6, 3% for inflation, you're at 3, mortgage rate sitting at 7%. Like just stay away from it. It's just boring. Paying off debt is boring. And it's much sexier to talk about like your investment portfolio. That's why the math of like another free tip, maybe I'm jumping ahead and we'll talk about shares a bit later, like the direct investing, it's far exciting to go, here's what A2 Milk has done, and this is what's going on, and here's my stock portfolio, and here's a sweet Korean EV company that's just popped up and it's up 10%, opposed to I saved 12% interest on my mortgage. Like that's not a party starter.
Yeah. And no one gets too excited about paying down debt because you pay it and then it's boring, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, and then you go carry on with your life for another. And you can't log in and be like, oh, but I think what you do to make paying off debt cool, go into a mortgage calculator and see, okay, what's an extra repayment look like? For instance, what does it take off over the longer period? And then you realize like the compounded impact of clearing debt faster. That was one way for me. Yeah.
The time you save.
Yeah, it made it feel like a bit sexier when you start realizing like, oh, that's going to save me a year, like a year. But then we go, oh, what's a year and 30 years? Well, it's a year.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of time.
Yeah. I like how you like, this is how you make it cool.
Yeah.
Tom, having a will. Question about whether that sits within our ballpark or not. Why is it important to have a will?
Yeah. So the way we think about insurances and wills is, we're doing all this stuff to help people grow their position, okay, over the long term. That's a really good thing. But there's actually not that much of a point if somebody's going to grow their position over, say, 30 years or something like that, and then have it all wiped out or have it all. So what you got to think about, what would you like to happen should the unthinkable happen? And basically you'd like your wishes to keep going, and you like those who you love and who you're close to be able to continue and to be able to keep. So that's where a will comes in, and we'll go over insurances as well. But basically you don't want people to be wiped out and that their entire trajectory have been worthless.
Yeah, I think there's also assumptions on what happens.
Yeah.
People assume, oh, my spouse will just get it, or my kids will just get it, or whatever. There are lots of different ways things can play out in terms of probate and potentially the government receiving some of the money. Potentially family members that you don't want to receive the money that are gonna receive it. So I would definitely sort that out. And the other thing I don't also say is just in terms of those cheap will kits, buyer beware. It might be very cheap on the upfront piece, but could be very expensive on the other side. I've got a client where in terms of probate, they're in the tens of thousands of dollars instead of, the husband who passed away paying, $500 for a will with a lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even if you got kids, right, you probably want to be having conversations around, okay, what's to happen if something happens to us?
Yeah.
And that's pretty important.
Yeah, I've put Cooper down, you and Ravi. I reckon that's a great duo to raise my son.
Oh, wow. Imagine that. Bring it on.
Yeah. Insurances. So let's talk about insurances. So so there's 3 different types of insurances. Health insurance, I won't go on this too long, otherwise we'll lose everybody. Health insurance, I don't know if you guys have seen what's happening. Like, you tried to go to a doctor recently. The medical system, there are some great people working in that medical system. People are working really hard. The system feels like it's getting more and more broken over time. And then if you have a illness and you are going on a waiting list, we know the most common surgery, the waiting time is 180 days, and the average cost is $20,000 for it to get paid, and medical inflation is going rampant at the moment. And then if you like, I know one story around somebody had like a tumor in their chest, but it wasn't going to kill them. So they were like, you're right. But it was uncomfortable enough and incapacitated them enough they couldn't work for, I think they waited like 12 months to get on this list. So like the impact in terms of the impact on their loss of income is a big one. The other two, life insurance and income protection, pretty straightforward ones. If you die, what is the impact on the people who are dependent on you? If you have nobody who is dependent on you, probably don't need life insurance. If you haven't reviewed your life insurance, probably a good idea to review it. But it is really as simple as going, if I died, what would be the impact on the other person? Income protection is if you cannot work because you are sick, not redundant. That's what the emergency fund for is. If you are sick, how would you be able to pay your bills? And most people would need their income. Their insurance can be very expensive. And the other thing is you've got conflicts of interest with insurance advisors. The more they sell you, the more they get paid. And there's also a disparity with information, right? The advisor knows a lot, the person knows very little. I would still recommend you find like a good insurance advisor, only if I knew a good one. Oh, that's right, we're insurance advisors. And if you had a conversation, went through some quotes, went through some options, some insurance is better than none. I talked to somebody the other day, because it's really top of mind for me at the moment. 33-year-old single mom, husband's just passed away from bowel cancer, and like they've been forced to sell their house, and she wasn't earning because she was looking after the kid and all that stuff. So it is very, very real. And I had somebody today tell me, we're not insurance people, we don't see the value. And I just responded and I go, I guess nobody close to you has ever died or got sick, because that's the only possible. You don't get to choose. And the weird thing about insurance, all types of insurance, you hope it's a waste of money. You hope you give somebody thousands of dollars to this big corporation and you never get a cent back, because that means a life well lived.
I suppose you're probably seeing a few people say that they would rather, because I've had people asking me, and no, I'm not trying to crunch any numbers to figure this out, but if instead of paying the insurance, you must be getting
this
that.
It's a great one. Yeah. So people going, instead of giving the insurance company money, I'm going to invest the money, and then the money can be there. So this is a great strategy if you don't die for 30 years. If you get sick or die soon, you're screwed. The other one that I've heard it with, which much love to my parents-in-law, they don't have insurance for their cat, and they put money away for the cat, and the cat hasn't got sick for 10 years, and they go, see, wasn't that a good idea? And I'm like, because like pet insurance is quite expensive. With 3 dogs, you're probably well aware of that. But the big thing is, it's fine until it's not fine. That's and people come to us and go, fix it. And I go, I can't fix it because it's all ruined.
A year ago, we could have.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess those people they're self-insuring, right? And there is like eventually on your wealth journey, which is probably well beyond this, some people do go, right, you know what, I can dial back my life insurance 100%. Because I've got KiwiSaver or whatnot.
Yeah, I spoke to a couple that were in their 50s, and I was like, you guys have a debt-free home, your kids are grown up, why have you got $1.5 million of life insurance? And he was like, well, when I got this mortgage, my kids were this big, I had a big mortgage, and I had hair. And all 3 of those things have changed. And I was like, okay, let's save you some money, because it just doesn't make sense to just
it would be getting more expensive for them the older they get.
And there's sort of a lag with a lot of these insurances. We wait too long to get them, and then we hold on to them way too long. So those reviews are really important.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Just on that was what I was going to say about debt as well is, do you know what's weird? I've been thinking about this recently is you leave it till you're well into debt to use a debt calculator, and then you're like, oh, I'm too far gone. But like we don't go to the debt calculator at $2,000. We wait till we're at like 8 or 10 or this uncomfortable amount of money to then go, okay, how do I get my way out of this? But subconsciously, I reckon we know at about $2,000, or once we go past that 2 to the 3, we're like, man, I know I really shouldn't be doing this. But then you do, and then you go again, and you keep getting away with it, and then eventually you're like, I need to sort this out. But then it feels so much harder because you've left it so much longer.
So much of it's just like a mindset thing. Like I even think about everybody on this call is doing something all right? Because they're giving up their time at 6 p.m. on the Tuesday night. And I'm super happy for everybody that's here. But I also really want to talk to all the people who haven't chosen to be here. Because it's not as bad, or they're like, it'll be all right. And like, how do you get the, because we'll all, everybody on this webinar will know people in their lives where you're like, just want to shake them and like
Yeah.
to make better decisions. But how do you, the light goes on that they're going to
Yeah.
make those decisions?
There'll be something in this workshop and webinar for everybody that they know, like, oh, no, I really should think about getting a will, but yeah, maybe next week.
Yeah.
Something, right? But we've just got to tackle it.
And that would be my big thing is I don't expect everybody of this webinar to like run off and do 100 things. Just what is the smallest, littlest step you can take? And then once you've taken that step, what is the next little step you can take?
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so Tom, you said you wanted a bigger emergency fund. We've paid off the debt. We've sorted the wills. Now we're getting this.
Yeah, and we've sort of covered this a little bit about the risks that you're covering here, and I'm really glad you brought up self-insurance, because that if all of us were crazy rich, we wouldn't need insurance at all. We just cover it ourselves, right? But at a certain point, you have to figure out, well, how much am I going to cover, and how much am I going to transfer that risk over to a company to do? So that's that balance.
Yeah, and if you have this emergency fund, you will never need to use bad debts again. And what a great place to be.
Yeah. Pretty self-explanatory, that one, but just probably feels hard and a distant. And I think the competing thing too is people probably think, oh, well, like I don't want to have that much money sitting there, or I'd rather clear my debt, or I'd rather find out, from Mike, can I offset my mortgage? Or we want to do something sexy because we hate just seeing money sitting there thinking, well, I'm never going to need to touch that.
Yeah.
But also I think as well, the just on emergency funds, with the people who think I'll put it into Sharesies, for instance, I took some money out of Sharesies the other day. Like, oh, do you want it today? Great, 2%, and we'll give it to you today. I'm like, well, no, I can wait. But a lot of people won't be able to wait when they need to liquidate that cash.
Emergency, yeah.
And it's like, well, there's 2% of it gone. So you better have been getting a good return on that. You're not only paying fees, but now you're going to lose 2% on the way out if you need it today.
Yeah. What are our thoughts for those that have a mortgage using like a offset savings or a revolving credit as their emergency fund?
Like I get it, and I think it's it sounds really good, but honestly, how do I say it nicely? The struggle that I see business clients go through that are like, okay, we're gonna offset our mortgage with our tax and stuff, and then they get comfortable holding on to it, and it's like, hey, we need that money back in the business now to pay the tax. Like, oh, well, is there like something we can? And then they just start losing track of whose money's who and what's going on. And sometimes I'm like, guys, like you've made this so much harder for yourselves. You're probably not actually getting the benefit of offsetting this, like, let's say 30 grand worth of to save what, maybe $1,500 of interest. You could have spent that time trying to get more sales, but now we've had to have phone calls about it and stuff. And you could have put that time into doing more.
Yeah. The math of doing an offset or revolving credit makes sense. The psychology side of can you be trusted is a completely different discussion.
I don't see many people master it.
No.
I'd love to see the data actually on how much people are getting out of that. Like, is it really working for people, right? In principle, it sounds like it should be fine.
Yeah, because the purpose of an emergency fund is not return. The purpose of an emergency fund is liquidity and
resilience.
Yeah, and having it kind of segregated from everything else, right? So, and it's about knowing yourself as well. Like I've spoken about my brother before, who I love very much, but boy, is he terrible with financial decisions. So he has 10% KiwiSaver contributions, which I have mandated. Yeah. And then I had an automatic payment going to an investment account for him. And we would then negotiate whenever he gets a pay rise of what the percentage will be. He keeps this, goes into the fund. And then the cheeky bastard started to change the AP and pause it on his online banking. So you know what I did, Luke?
You took his password out of it.
I set up a direct debit, and now he can't touch it. So like that is just like with the emergency fund component. It's also about knowing yourself well enough. Like how do you set up the infrastructure if you know that you have a sweet tooth at night and you're trying to hit fitness goals, drive away home that you don't go past the dairy or whatever.
And I guess that's probably what's interesting about your job, because like with mine, for instance, with accounting, sometimes a client will say, oh, we might not pay our tax and we're going to do this. And I'm like, no, you need to pay it because I know you and I can, I know that you're going to complicate this. It's not worth it. Just pay it. Trust me. And you feel more confident telling them what they need to do. But I'm sure people come to you and go like, hey, can we borrow $2 million or something? And they probably can on paper, but then they might live in anxiety for the next, like they can't actually mentally or emotionally handle the debt or whatnot. And then it's like, well, was it actually worth it just because you could get access to that cash?
Yeah.
But then you can't live with it. Then what was
Yeah.
the point?
Yeah. We talk about like current you and future you. And the aim of the game is not to screw over either party. It's a relationship. And you're never going to be younger than you are right now. If you have kids that are like, I also always crack the same jokes. I just know what hits the crowd. I go like, your kids won't like you forever. So you might as well have those experiences with your kids while they still like you before they're too cool, wearing their shorts and their flat peak caps, going to concerts at 35.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, so you want to live that life. Most people don't have the issue going spend more money now. Most people are around like, what is the impact to the future person?
Yes.
So like we've got these beautiful projections where we can go like, you want $2 million of debt? No worries. And I press the button and everything breaks. And then my laptop starts shaking and comes out of it. And they go, yeah, that's a bad idea, eh? And I'm like, that's what the projections would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree. But that's why from a financial planning perspective, you go like, current you, future you, like what is that balance? Because you also don't want to die with heaps of money either. Cool. Let's move on, Ravi.
So on this one, what I just say is budgets are interesting. They're just plans for your money, but they can achieve two different things. One is they can reinforce the status quo, what you're already doing, which is kind of useless when you think about it. If you're going to keep doing the same thing, if you're going to use a budget plan, or you can hack into what you're doing and get a radically different outcome, which is, of course, what we're after. So we designed this tool in order to get that latter one. So if you're looking to make a new plan with what you're doing with your money, this is the tool for you. This is
Why do you think budgets aren't cool?
Well, I think when people hear budgets, they think straitjacket. You know, like this is really constraining. When actually it's your tool to actually get what you want.
Yeah,
that's really what it's meant to be for.
Remember, there's been a famous brand in New Zealand called Budget, and it's like the cheap food at the supermarket. Maybe we should rename a budget to Abundance or like Baller. Have you done your baller this week?
Hey, you could work for a buy now, pay later company with that kind of marketing mindset.
We need some pestle baller abundance planners, and we're on.
I don't know where that was going, but anyway. So I would say like probably, I don't know, 20% of the people that come to me are any good at budgeting. So I tell them, because they think the exact same thing. They go, you're going to restrict me. And I go, no, I don't want to restrict you.
Steal my fun.
Yeah, I don't want to restrict you. I want to be able to measure what you're doing, because I need to understand what's happening now. What is the strategy going forward?
Yeah.
And then what do the projections look like? And so we use PocketSmith with a lot of our clients. Great tool. It pulls in all of your online bank accounts, and then you can categorize the budget, and it sits like a live budget off the back of it. I describe it as amazing and terrifying.
Yeah.
Because the thing about like a budget that you write down is you can lie to it, right?
Yep.
You can put it down and then do whatever the hell you want. But if it's all like this is actually what's happening, there's nowhere to lie. And Luke, the other thing I think is really important with the budget is a budget's actually not really about the expenses. It's utilizing your biggest asset, right? Which is your income.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece that we often miss, is the ability to increase our income to then make our budget completely different, to then create a difference, to then what do we do with that? And then on the other side, okay, let's not just focus on money in, money out and what we're supposed to be spending. What are we stacking? So what's happening with our assets? What's happening with our debts? Like for me, it was more exciting to see my credit card balance decreasing than it was to be doing a budget religiously. But my budget fed into what do I have left over to then clear it. Oh, I can actually clear $800, not $500 this month, because I've got a little bit extra coming in or whatnot. And I had a clear goal. So I'd map my budget towards my goals. And that's how I found it to be a little bit more exciting.
And the perfect thing about a lot of this, Tom, is like it's kind of like, what's the best diet? It's whatever works for you. So there is 1,000 different ways to budget, and you've just got to find the system that works for you, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of financial planning talks about goals and things like that, but actually I love what James Clear says about, goals and systems, because we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems.
Love that.
So if you don't, it's one of my favorite things, right? So if you don't get a system in place to get a different outcome, you're basically not going to be able to get to your goals.
Yeah. So if we do talk about systems and processes, so the budget's important, but then having the right bank account structure. So what are the bank accounts? What is the purpose? Automatic payments are your best friend.
Love
And
automatic payments.
I actually tend to agree with you in terms of pay the tax now. I'm also like when there is discretionary cash, I'm bumping up the mortgage repayment.
Yeah.
I'm we're not risking this.
Yeah.
We're doing this now. And then in the back of my mind, I'll also talk to the mortgage broker about let's just go with a bank where you can reduce the mortgage repayments if we absolutely had to, but I'm not telling them that.
Yeah.
One other thing, two more things. One, Ravi, is if we can just pop in there the budgeting episode that Jess and Michaela did. That's a good kind of 30-minute discussion talking more in depth on budgets. The second thing is, at the moment, we have nothing in the QA. So we've got over 100 people in this webinar, but no questions. So make sure to pop those questions in as we go so we can answer them at the end.
Oh, I thought I saw chats popping up there. Yeah, just on the APs, mate. I've actually gotten through. So I started some APs in May last year, and I'm now 12 months in. Right at the time, I was like, oh, I'll probably change these in the coming 6 months or something, but I'll see how I go with them. But I haven't changed,
right?
Yeah.
And I've actually increased some of them.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm still getting by here. This is good.
Yeah. And the saying is, because you have to invest the time up front, right? And it's admin, and you don't want to do it, and you want to do something more fun with your
It
weekend.
doesn't take much, though. I mean, it's pretty simple to set up an AP these days. What do you need, 10 minutes?
Yeah. And
maybe even less.
But if you get the system right, you can manage your money in 5 minutes a week, and it all just works like clockwork.
Yeah. And it saves you from yourself forgetting to do something. So it might be putting money into Sharesies or your emergency fund or whatever it is that you're doing, or your KiwiSaver. Like I just set a religious one to start increasing my KiwiSaver balance to catch up on some non-contributing in my 20s. And I'm like, right, well, I don't want to keep coming back and be like, oh, how much should I put in this time? I've got a bit of spare cash. And I'm just like, nah, I'm going to set up an AP and it's in every week. It's dollar cost averaged. And I don't need to think about it anymore. Great, out of my mind.
Lots of times, I think the only reason why I'm successful with money at all is because you can automate stuff.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that question that you just said before. I think it's one of the key questions in all of this. What are we stacking? What are we stacking?
Yeah.
That's really what.
Gents, can you believe we're 55 minutes in already?
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's keep moving this along. Start investing. So we've talked about all the boring stuff. Sorry, it took 55 minutes. But we've still got everybody here, so something must be going all right. So the fun part, it's time to start investing. But the very obvious questions we get is, should you wait to invest? Should we wait, Luke, till there's another crash and then we'll put all our money in and then it'll go straight back up? What should we invest into? And then what are the pros and cons of each? So let's move into that. So we've got a study that was done from the year 2000 to the year 2020 with 5 different investing styles where you had $2,000 a year to invest for 20 years in a row. So $2,000 each year. What do we do with it? So there are 5 different investing styles, which I will talk through. And there is a poll question coming up in a second, which 80% of people get wrong. So we'll see how this group goes. First investing style, Peter Perfect. So Peter, Luke, is amazing. He invests at the lowest point each year, which is obviously means that it goes up from there. So he has perfect timing each year for 20 years in a row, which is statistically impossible. Ashley Action just invests the money on the first day of every month. Matthew Monthly, Luke, he talked about dollar cost averaging. That's exactly what he's doing. Divided by 12, each month puts in 2,000 divided by 12. Rosie Rotten is just as unlikely to happen as Peter Perfect. She is invested at the highest point each year, and then the market has gone down. Might be like those who bought property in 2021, where they're like, Jesus, was a horrible time to buy a house. And Larry Linger. Larry Linger is an engineer because he's done some analysis, and then he's done some more analysis, and some more analysis, and has done absolutely nothing and stayed in cash. Much love to the engineers, but
just it's solid.
Pull the trigger. So the question is, who do you think has had the best results? And this is also a good way for us to test how many people are actually listening to us.
Yeah.
What do you guys reckon?
I feel like you've given me this answer before. I'm pretty sure I got it wrong last time. I'm an action taker, so I know that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, keeping it simple.
Yeah. Just taking action, highs and lows. The whole timing and the perfect thing. I don't know. I've never really been like that because I just
Perfect.
well, yeah, that too. Yeah. But like yeah, I've never got stuck at I'm just gonna collect all the info. But I've done personality profiling and stuff, and I can see why now I'm an activator. I get things done and like I make mistakes and whatnot. And I often find my mistakes in in the future and then go like, oh shit, I spelt that wrong or whatnot. But I take enough action to balance it out.
Yeah, Ravi's giving me a look. Ravi, what are the results?
That's
And
right.
it is the very standard outcome that Matthew Monthly is at 52%, Ashley Actions at 31%. It is not a trick question, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Perfect is perfect. So he has invested the best time 20 years in a row. If he charges you a high fee, pay it because that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Peter Perfect is not that interesting at 151,000 over those 20 years. Gents, the interesting thing is probably the rest of them.
Yeah.
So Ashley Action is $15,000 behind, along with Matthew Monthly. Ashley Action and Matthew Monthly over 20 years both have been essentially dollar cost average. Rosie Rotten and Larry Linger are the really interesting ones, though. And I think that's a really good reminder of where we are right now. For those that, like, if you think about buying a Ponsonby Villa in the 1970s, right, and going, well, it's going to cost me $70,000 right now, but I think the market might drop and maybe I'll get it for 68,000. If we fast forward 20, 30 years, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing with Rosie Rotten as well. At that point in time, it was a bad time to invest. As long as you are diversified in some way, time is your best friend and will fix most wounds. But Larry Linger has not deployed his capital. He has not stacked his cash in an effective way. And Larry Linger is more than 3 times worse off than any other party, which just shows that if you're just going, like, just saving your way to retirement, saving your way to financial freedom is a very, very hard and inefficient way to do it.
Yeah, I guess it highlights inflation too, right? Like it's something I was talking about recently where people are saying, I don't know how to get started with investing and I'm scared to lose money. It's like, well, you need to understand that by not investing, you are already taking a risk because your money is becoming worth less. And once you learn a bit more about that, then you realize that, oh, okay, this is why other people make sense of investing and trying to protect their money that is effectively, decreasing in value in some ways.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think about the results?
Well, what we're really after is trying to take advantage of this growth engine over time, and it's time and compounding, and you can see the results there. And on each extreme, as you say, it's actually impossible to be either one of those two, and most of us end up being either the action one or the monthly one, and you end up dollar cost averaging and taking advantage of it.
And that's obviously what you're doing with your KiwiSaver as well. And I think the big thing is there's risk regardless, right? You do nothing, there's opportunity cost, which you not consider enough. And if you take too much risk and you haven't thought about right, there's, it's kind of both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. I think what I was working out the other day, I think part of why people don't invest is because they haven't then learned how to make more money. And so then we are scared of losing it, which is a tough conversation to have because how do we just encourage everyone to like, oh, don't worry, just make more money, then you can always risk more. But, I think the people who get really stuck at the like, oh, the Larry Linger, do I want to risk that? What if it goes backwards? Part of it is because we're so worried that we'll never get that money back. But then I think we trap ourselves into scarcity and not figuring out, okay, you know what's a better investment than Larry Lingering and what you could even put it into? It's like, how can I take my income and get a 10% increase in it in the next 12 months? And then how can I learn to do that over time and compound it? And you will blow away, what is possible in your life by focusing on you as your own asset and your income generating potential. Yeah. And there might be a year in there where you don't get a pay rise, but then you might get a bonus that makes up for that and it blends itself out. But yeah, I think we're afraid to talk about that in New Zealand because we just go back towards, okay, what can we take out leftover money and invest that into rather than thinking about ourselves.
Yeah, and just to be very honest, if you don't have your income at a certain level, very hard to get a financial plan to work in terms for the projections. Because the cost of living is high, and you need to invest into yourself, make yourself desirable to the market. Talk to your boss. This is where I want to get to. How can you help me build a plan to get my income to X level?
Yeah.
Okay, Ravi, let's move forward. Shares versus property. So once again, I'm conscious of time. The answer is it's not one's good or one's bad. It's the right stage of life for the right asset class. So we've got two scenarios just to, troll the audience a little bit around, what gives the best return. So shares, initial capital of $140,000 and then a net return after fees and tax. We have an inflation adjusted. Versus property, you invest 140,000, you buy a property for 700,000. It goes up 5% a year, but you've got other costs that you need to factor in because, you have to pay tax and there's interest costs on the mortgage, rates, insurance, all of those sort of things. So in those two examples, Ravi, if we move to the next slide, the outcomes year on year. So shares are 8,400 per annum. Property is 20,000 per annum as an investment. Now, the reason why this is so attractive is shares are actually pound for pound a better investment. It's far more diversified than buying like some dirt in a small island nation. You're invested into far more companies and it's generating a higher income. The reason why property is so attractive is you can put some money down, get a huge mortgage from the bank, and then get to keep all of the capital gains. So property is a very attractive investment vehicle. Where shares do work for a lot of people, though, is when we start talking about cash flow. So you can't sell a bedroom to go on a holiday. Find me a cash flow positive property. Like it's very hard to find right now with where interest rates are. So as long as you're working and you're growing your wealth and you've got your income, property's fine. But I've got people I've spoken to in their 70s and they go like, James, I've got like a $3 million portfolio. And I'm like, yeah, but Bob and Greta, you've got no income. You've just got New Zealand superannuation. Why don't you sell the properties, put it into a fund, spend the money, go live your best life on a cruise?
I can't sell this.
Yeah, that's right. It's worked well. People really struggle with what's worked well for them, but it's the right tool at the right stage of their life.
What could be fun for people to do? I don't know if you guys saw recently, but the Prime Minister is selling off one of his rental properties. And if you like Google it and have a look, the media articles are basically like Luxon's made several $1,000s, I think the terminology, but it's like hundreds of thousands. When they say make, it's basically what could he sell it for? What was it?
Yeah.
But I actually took, because he's debt free on his properties, I believe. I took that money and I took the dates and I put it into the S&P 500 compound calculator. And he's taken an absolute bath buying this property. But the article is like, oh, he's made heaps to trying to trigger us into like, oh, wow. But it doesn't, factor in any real estate costs or whatnot. And I think there's always like when you learn more about finance and different forms of investing and stuff, you can almost pull yourself out of those emotional responses to articles because you don't just go like, oh wow, like Luxon is about to make heaps of money on this. This is like this feels frustrating, etc. You realize like, oh, okay. And then I even took the amount and I adjusted it for CPI inflation, and it hasn't even kept up. Oh, sorry, housing inflation. It hasn't even kept up with that. So it's actually a fairly poor investment. But you would read the article and think, oh, he's done really well out of this. This has triggered me. But you get to like play with some of those things that you see in the everyday news and go, okay, well, what's a different way to look at something like this?
Yeah, because things are not what they seem.
No.
One of the pictures had him painting that property, right? So how much does it cost to maintain? It cost to, so there's a lot of those costs that don't get calculated in to understand whether it's a good investment or not.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about good and bad debt, right? Like debt-free investment property is actually a very inefficient investment a lot of the time. And also like the benefit of property, like we've just pointed out here, is leverage. You have no leverage. You could just put that money into a fund, actually reduce your risk. Because we're talking about like floods and natural disasters and all those kind of things versus being exposed to thousands of different companies doing all different sorts of things in different and then invest into different asset classes in different parts of the world. So
I think as well, like it just highlights, we will have clients that will say like, oh, our competitors are doing X, Y, Z now in their business and we need to be doing that. And I'm always like, oh, man, how much money do they make? Oh, I don't know. How much money do they owe the IRD? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, so then why are we focusing on them? You're just looking at the high level piece. Let's stick to what's on your plan, what you're trying to build, and let's get moving with that again.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's actually a really good point, Tom, in terms of like the keeping up with the Joneses, the Instagram life going, this person's going to this school or got this car or this person's living in this house. But you have no idea what's happening behind the scenes, right? They might be screaming in terms of their interest costs or like their ticked up car or whatever. It's a very dangerous game to compare yourself to others.
Yeah. Things are not what they seem.
No, visibility is a fake metric for success in this world. Yeah.
I like that. Cool. Okay. And then, so Tom, talk to us. You've also got the sorted mortgage calculator here.
Yeah.
Why would somebody go and have a look at this?
So this is really key because this is actually our most popular tool on Sorted. And every time interest rates change, you can get like 10,000 people all at once going on there, so trying to figure out what the bank makes to them. Yeah. And what we're seeing here is just that power. There are lots of different mortgage tools out there, but this one really emphasizes what happens if you start to use those levers that really start to restructure these mortgage products more in your favor? Because if you leave a mortgage to how it's set up, obviously whose favor is it in? The lender, right?
Yeah.
Right, the bank. But we actually have a lot more power than we think we do. And this tool, demonstrates that over and over again.
Yeah. And I think like we talk about the small consistent steps, and we don't get that endorphin hit for going like when you pay, you've got like new clothes or whatever you bought. This actually gives you that endorphin hit where you go, wow, an extra $100 a week means I'm going to pay off my mortgage 3 years faster and save $200,000.
Yeah, this is where you can see it right away. How much interest costs you're saving, how much time you're saving.
Yeah.
It's all right there.
Awesome. Okay, so we're about to move to the Q&A piece. Obviously, a couple of quick plugs. So like if you want to talk about your own situation, we're going to talk generally and answer the Q&A questions. But if you want to get a financial plan, obviously Lighthouse is here to help. We do a 30-minute free consultation because we've got to work out what's going on in your situation and whether we can help. But if you are thinking you lack structure, you don't know what your goals are, you don't have a budget, you don't know what your investment strategy, you don't know where you're going, fill out scan the QR code, have a chat. We are booked up until like sometime in September.
Nice.
So a lot of demand for financial advisors right now, but definitely like book a time in September for us to have a chat if you want to talk about your situation.
Even I would say if you are watching this, chuck something up on your Instagram story as well. Tag Keep the Change and Lighthouse Financial, even Sorted. And I'm sure we'll be able to reshare that on socials, but it'll encourage more people to. This is what happens every time. They're like, oh, I forgot about that. Is there a replay of that? Can I get the replay of that? So it'll just remind people that it was on and they forgot to sign up.
Yeah. The mortgage, I don't usually do the mortgage plug. So I'm going to give this my best go. I've been waiting, Ravi, for years to do this. So if you want to talk about like buying your first home, buying an investment property, you are struggling with 7% interest rates, you're not sure how to structure your mortgage. If you're struggling at the moment, in particular, the worst thing you can possibly do is put your head in the sand. The banks actually, despite their reputation, will work with you because they don't want to kick people out of their homes. So if you need advice from a lending perspective, scan the QR code, talk to one of the team. A mortgage broker, it's a bizarre service. Like essentially the bank go, we're not going to service our customers. So how about you guys go and do it and we'll pay for it. So you don't pay for a mortgage broker. And they've got access to the whole market. So while your bank might say no, another bank might say yes.
Even it's just like you don't know what you don't know, right? And I go back to offsets earlier. There's a bit of chat at the moment about the products banks offer where you can offset some of your mortgage with money that your family have, for instance. And a lot of people are like, wow, how does that work? Tell me more about that. But it'll be specific banks with specific offerings, but it could actually be something that saves someone a lot of interest and they just haven't had that education.
Definitely. I mean, so much of like shares versus property, right? Whether you believe one over the other, it's about educating yourself and understanding what these tools are and how they work. I haven't thrown you off, Ravi, too much, so I'm standing up. Just getting a little sore carrying the team. Hey, go back, checks and balances very quickly before Luke gets a plug. I get 3 plugs before he gets 1. That's how this thing works, okay? So checks and balances is flying high. We did an awesome interview with Sam Stubbs last week. Really interesting about like the future of KiwiSaver and the impact it can have on New Zealand. We put podcast episodes out 3 times a week. Spotify, YouTube, Apple. Make sure to have a look.
Nice. I listened to that one with Sam Stubbs. Yeah, look, I'm getting out. I'm starting to do 4 podcasts a week, 63 live videos, and
coming on twice a week.
yeah. So obviously there's probably a lot of listeners to the Keep the Change podcast. So shout out to them for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing 320 of them live at Keep the Change Unplug in September as well. But if you haven't checked out the Keep the Change podcast, there'll be something in there for you. There's over 500 podcasts now and a stack of new content on YouTube as well. And there's plenty more to come in the coming months.
I will be at that event as well.
Good man.
Looking forward to it. Does Tom get a plug? What's happening here, Ravi?
Well, actually, what I was going to say too is for Sorted, because I was going to put this into a money mail on Friday. there's a page where it's got different events that people are hosting for
Money Month.
Yeah,
that,
and there are so many good ones.
if you hop on there, you can see for the last 2 weeks of Money Month, what's going on.
Yeah, there's women specific content. There is all sorts like budgeting and different people of different age groups and stuff. So yeah, I was blown away at what's actually people are putting together around the country. And yeah, it's cool to see it getting some serious momentum.
Oh, I mean, you think about like having these conversations, right? Like, I just, money doesn't make you happy, but it's very hard to be happy if your money's not in a certain level of order, right? And the purpose of money, which I've stolen this line from you, I use every bloody day. The purpose of money is to help you live the life you want to live, right?
Oh, nice. I thought you were going to go the old money is a tool, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I've been thinking about recently that I think is a good thing for Pause Get Sorted is that in a few years' time, we're not going to be in a recession. Now,
Years.
I've been talking about, but we're going to look back and be like, oh, remember when, and we're going to end up, some people are going to have recession regret of, I wish I did a bit more of that. So I've been encouraging business clients at the moment to think about, what do you know that you're going to end up looking back at this time and regretting and thinking, I wish I did a bit more of that. Or it might be that, we do start seeing interest rates come back down. And because you've educated yourself that, okay, I should start clearing some debt. But in 3 or 5 years' time, you look back and it's like, oh, we ended up, ticking up the new car or whatever because I hadn't convinced my partner that that was what we should be doing, clearing debt, and hadn't got them on the same page. I really should have had a yarn to them, or we should have got the will done or whatever. So sometimes just think about how quickly the world moves and what you may look back to this time and think, wow, I knew better, but I didn't take the action. So what could you end up regretting?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we're going to look back at this time and people who took action, they're going to be like, geez, didn't you get lucky?
Yeah.
Didn't that work out well for you? But it's like, nah, you bought the property when interest rates were at 7%, house prices were down 20%. Everybody was scared telling you not to do it. You invested into the NZX 50, even though it had been flat for 3 years, and historically it's a very long time for it not to be doing anything. You invested in yourself.
Yeah.
All of those sort of things. And the big part with all of this, right, is if you have that good structure, the actual answer is people like James, what do you think about like the S&P dropping or the Japanese stock market dropping? I go, I don't care. None of it matters at all because I'm not thinking about what's happening today or tomorrow. I'm thinking about what's going to happen over a decade. And you just want to take the law of averages. If you think you're smarter than the law of averages, you're just not. If you're trying to trade derivatives or any of that kind of stuff, like best of luck to you, but statistically very unlikely to work. So we've got some questions. So there's not a hell of a lot. So if you do have any other questions, pop them in. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up very soon. First question, and gents, either of you can take this. Is it best to talk to a bank about a high yield savings account, or is there an organization that will compare and not be biased?
Tom may know, because I don't get into the whole comparing and finding the best rate, because I find that you give people, like, you go and do that, but it changes a month later. And you're like, oh man, I need to update that.
Yeah. So, but if you really want to know, you could go to interest.co.nz and we pipe in, for example, their mortgage rates from there into our mortgage calculator. But if you're comparing, high yield, as you say, you can see what's out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout, interest.co.nz. The same goes with lending. So if you've got a loan rolling off, and firstly, you should be talking to a broker, in my opinion. But if you're not and you're doing it yourself, comparing all the banks and see going, TSB is actually doing 6.79 for 6 months. Can you match that or whatever? The other comment I'd have about high yield savings accounts, just remember all high yield savings accounts are not equal. Unfortunately, obviously, with what's happened with Duval over the last little while, like there's some lessons around that. A 10% return is risk adjusted, right?
Yeah.
And you've just got to remember there's no free lunches out there.
No. And even, you might look at something and go, oh, that's a savings account and it's at a higher rate, but it's actually a fund. And then you've got to, then do you understand what that means? Or that one's set up as a pie fund, for instance, but it's kind of marketed to you that you can dip your money in and out. And you just need to understand, like, is that 5.8 versus the 5.7? Is that the thing that's going to change the trajectory of your life? Probably not. You probably go back to, okay, what about investing back into myself, and just taking more action is probably going to be more beneficial to you than finding the best bank account. Because in 2 months' time, you'll hear from someone, oh, I did this and their rate was slightly higher. And you go like, oh, damn it. Now I've got to pull my money out of this and I've got to move it over to there and I've got to take
exactly. It's a
half an
temporary
hour.
thing. And then you find yourself changing products way too often.
Yeah.
Can come at a cost.
Yeah, it's like changing KiwiSaver providers all the time, right? Like some research has come out on that. It's just find one that works for you and leave it alone. Don't trade KiwiSaver funds. That does not work whatsoever.
Well, I did it once and I got skinned like 2.8%.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah. Next question, slightly grim one. What happens to debt if you die? Does it get passed on to the loved ones? Also, if your parents go as a guarantor for your home and you die, does the debt get passed on to them? So you can't pass on debt, but obviously there's like a net financial position. So if you have assets and you have debts, those will need to be paid before anything is paid out to the estate. If your parents go guarantor for your home and they die, firstly, leave your parents alone. They're lovely for guaranteeing your loan. I don't think the bank won't care about whether they're still, they will care whether they're still there or not. They will care about the repayments at that point. Complexity. Any situation like that. Hopefully nobody's died, but if somebody has died, probably reach out. Next question. Just to be clear, any investment into shares other than KiwiSaver while you have a mortgage is not the best way forward. Thanks. Yep, that's the advice that we give clients. So like I said, in terms of net real return, 7% on the mortgage versus 3% net real return in shares. The reason why we do like KiwiSaver is say like you put in 3%, your employer puts in 3%. It's 100%. Yeah, 100% return your money. Very hard to beat.
But also you could find like someone will disagree with that advice, right? So I'm sure there'll be other financial advice. Like I've had someone tell me, no, I run the calcs on ChatGPT. That's wrong. You know, I did it based on a 10% compounding rate and all this. I'm like, okay, sweet. Like whatever. But you know, people got to make their decisions themselves, but you can actually give that advice. Whereas people will sort of throw out all of these different things online without actually understanding someone's situation.
Look, the other thing about funneling it towards your mortgage is it's actually more of a sure thing. Like the volatility in shares is going up and down all the time, and that's actually a feature. That's actually a good thing. But in terms of funneling against your mortgage, you're sure you're going to get that return against that mortgage, whatever that interest rate is.
Yeah, and people talk to me and go, "I'm missing out on compounding returns on shares, right?" And you go, "Well, do you notice when you pay off a little bit more of your debt, the next week you see there's less interest costs? It's actually reverse compounding interest. You're paying a little bit more principal, a little bit less interest. So it's going the other way, which is still a form of compounding in the other direction.
I think the most confusing thing about finance and money is we're always wired to try and get the maximum possible return. And, you know, I see this in the punting space, for instance, where it's like, oh, you know, this player was $2 to get a try, but they were $2.10 in Australia. And it's like, yeah, okay. And that we're just wired that way. But, you know, if you have a 30-year loan and you clear your debt in 20 years, imagine what that 10 years is going to be like and how differently you're going to think and what you're going to be doing compared to other people. And the risks that you might take compared to, okay, I'm going to try and time it perfectly so that my mortgage overlaps with my shares that I've been saving, and I might be able to clear it in year 17.95, but it's all based on 10.2% gain every year.
Yeah, if it drops 10.15,
it might change. It's just like, but I think we're so hardwired to almost make it too complicated rather than like, okay, maybe for me, it's just let's clear some debt because that's going to feel better. I'm going to get it. I know I've got a guaranteed return, and then I can do some cool stuff from year 21 through to 30 that I wouldn't have been able to do.
No, I definitely agree. Next question. I know you talked about emergency funds as offsets for businesses. Thoughts on it for your personal mortgage? I've got 18,000 in emergency fund, but thinking of going offset, which I would use this money for it. What do we think, gents?
I get the appeal of it. It's like we're talking about before, right? The math of, great, okay, let's say $18,000 at 7%. So, you know, what are you going to save? Like, what's that? $1,560 or something?
Yeah.
Like sounds amazing, but
Let me do math at like 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, Luke.
Sorry. But, you know, like, are you actually going to, because when you set up an offset mortgage, like you guys will know more about this than I, like at Mike, for instance, but you're still like the loan structure all changes, right? And the rates are different. And so you've got to make sure that it's offset. But then also I think your repayments are calculated differently. So then there's a cash flow element to it as well. It's not just as simple as basically like you don't need to pay the interest on that $18,000. Is that right?
Yeah. The math is, yes, it's statistically the best thing to do, but do you trust yourself enough with that money available, and the psychology around it is probably the other points.
I had a $15,000 credit card that I could access the cash off of and then offset against my mortgage. And I tell you, it didn't work out well for me. Because you start spending that, and then it's like, oh, okay, right. I was trying to get cute instead of actually just taking action.
Yep.
And if I had have just focused that into maybe earning some extra income, because I think is like the other thing that happens too is you go, right, I'm offsetting, so then you're winning, you're beating the system, you're getting a money gain, but really like that's just another tick, and you probably then focus back on, okay, how can I still pay this off faster? So if it then stops you from focusing on increasing income and then consistently paying it down faster, then have you really gained too much more?
Yeah. One thing I do like about, not necessarily tied to an emergency fund, but with offsets and revolving credits, is you can gamify it. So you can be like, the goal for this year is we've got like a $10,000 amount to like knock through, and then you like stack it again, you take it across and you go, now this is the goal. Because then you've got like something that people walk away from financial planning meetings, I think I talked for an hour, but what do you tell me to do? So like, oh, I'm going to pay off that loan. Like, we've agreed that's a good thing to do. The gamification of it's good. Next question. Should I be concerned putting off buying property and keeping money in investment funds and using the flexibility to travel overseas and work for a few more years? 33, no dependents, feeling that NZ house pressure when people I know have homes and investment property already. What do you guys reckon about like that pressure on, you got to get onto the property ladder?
Yeah, that's what that sounds like, that question, actually.
I spent a week in Fiji, right? And it really got me thinking about it, because you see how they live, and then it just gets you thinking about how stressful our lives are in New Zealand because of the cost of property whether that's renting or mortgages, and then you layer on the cost of that societal pressure of what are you doing? But then even, I think you lads were talking about it the other day, and we might have been talking on a pod, but the average first home buyer age is 37, right? But it's like you feel like everyone's doing it at 24.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a tricky one, because you know that you're probably going to go overseas. Well, everyone that's traveled is going to tell you to go overseas and have the time of your life, come back and worry about that stuff later. People that have a house are going to be like, nah, like this is what we did. You're going to end up regretting it. And so you're still going to be stuck. So I don't know. I think you can't ask other people to make your life decisions, because they don't actually know, what's really important to you. So if you are you're really bent on travel and you really want to do that, well, then that sounds like a priority to you. So you could buy the property, get on the ladder and be like, oh, great, 500 likes for the first year on social media, and then be like, I'm miserable. All I ever wanted to do was travel and I can't do it. And then you're like, oh, so it's so hard to answer people's questions like that.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say as well is like, we have clients where we tell them to rent for the rest of their life and invest in other ways. We have clients where we go, you should buy your first home. It just depends completely on your goals. One big thing is, who the hell cares what anybody thinks about you?
Yeah.
What is the life you are trying to design?
The other thing I mentioned there is, when people give you advice, they're usually talking about themselves and what worked for them. So, and one way to figure out what works for you is what Luke was talking about, and figure out what you value. And the other one is running some numbers, actually working with an advisor. And if you did it this way, what do the numbers look like? If you did it that way, what do the numbers look like? And how do you feel about them?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to quick fire through these, because
they're starting to come in.
Yeah, getting a little bit tired. Gonna go home, watch a little bit of American Survivor, I think.
Okay.
Honestly, Luke, show I'm built for is Survivor. I'm doing Survivor one day.
Can we get him on Survivor?
Got any content? Come on, Robbie.
Really?
If you've received an inheritance of approximately 100 grand, what would you recommend you do with it? It's come back to the exact same thing. What are the goals you're trying to achieve?
What's that money for?
Yeah. What are the goals? What do you do with the money in the medium term, say 5 years? Once again, really depends. A long time to be sitting in cash, not enough time for property. Probably some sort of like balanced investment fund would be a good idea, where maybe roughly half is in shares and property, half is in cash and bonds. But like I said, really depends. I wouldn't like the next question, which looks like it's off the back of it, is around too long to put in term deposits. I would tend to agree with that. Also, side note, term deposits are a horrible place for an emergency fund to sit because it's not liquid.
Yeah. Hard to access.
Yeah. Next one. Can I have one? Thanks for your time today. Can I have one piece of advice from each of you that brought you to where you are today?
Want me to go first?
Go.
Yeah, learn how to add more value to other people's lives. If you do that via helping people, you'll help yourself. You'll be able to help even more people. It sounds simple, but I promise you it works.
Yeah, mine's very similar. It's not around investing into shares or property or anything like that. It's set meaningful goals, work bloody hard, and just remember results like take a lot of time. And if you measure yourself off success in a month or 6 months or a year, or sometimes even like 3 or 4 years, your time frame is too short. You need to keep doing quality over time and it will pay you back.
Yeah.
Mine's actually similar to yours, Luke. It's the art of getting other people around you to where they need to go.
Yeah.
But then in terms of personal finance, automate as much as you can. That is really
that's nice. Yeah. Hey, we've all kind of like overlapped there, but what James said too, like I think we did 5 years at primary, 5 years at high school, maybe 3 or 4 years at uni or whatever. If you find something you like doing and work on it for 5 years, you'll blitz most New Zealanders. Because we're not trained to work in 5-year blocks anymore. It's like, 5 years of
swiping.
Yeah, but most people look back and like, oh, I can't believe I've been there for 5 years or whatever. But if you find something you're passionate about that you can keep fired up and keep energetic, you're going to find that people are just like they're trying to time the market with investing. That's what they're doing in their lives. Like, I'm going to do year at that career, year at that. Oh, you know what? Now I might go overseas for a bit. Then I'm going to come back. Oh, maybe I'll start doing that. And if you've just done something for 5 years, you're going to find that you make so much more progress than you even realize is possible because you're just not competing with as many people because they're not going to do that too.
Yeah.
Compounding doesn't just happen in the investment market.
No,
it happens in life, right?
Yeah.
When you compound stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And by growing your skill set, by investing into assets, it puts you into opportunities that you could take advantage of, which if you never started, you can never take advantage of. The other thing I'd say is everybody's in a different situation. And that's the other thing I'd say is, don't focus on somebody else has got it better or whatever it might be. You're just in the situation you're in. You have to focus on the action you can take from where you are. It doesn't do any good showing, somebody else has got it better, but it is so easy to win. Like, don't get me wrong, it's hard to win. Like, I remind myself, I'm just like, oh, this is so hard. Why do I do it? But it's easy to win because everybody else, like you said, won't put in the work, and you just have to measure yourself over a long enough period of time.
Well, even like coming here today, I was thinking like, why are we here? Like, we don't need to be here, but it's like, because we care. And then we know that people are going to win off the back of this, or it's going to make for better people. And that's actually like fulfilling and it drives us, and that's great. So then, I'm walking here with my Subway 6-inch, like eating it halfway, being like, why is that guy late, etc. And you're just finding reasons like anybody to, get distracted or think that they're trickier than what they need to be. But the more that you just slowly, consistently take action, then things start happening and you realize like, oh, wow.
I wonder if that person asked that question knowing that this will go like a lot longer because it was so like open-ended.
Yeah.
Last question, what do people usually do with their shares if they've been investing for only a couple of years, then get onto the property ladder but don't necessarily need the money from the shares? Do people usually just hold and get rid of them after 10 years or so? Like I said, my advice is pay down debt before you invest into shares. So it's the same sort of thing. If it's investment property, it might be slightly different. But if you need to talk about your own situation, you should talk to a financial advisor.
In general, shares is a long-term play.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know what you guys say, but for share funds, we usually telling people about at least 13 years that you want to be in. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think that with all things like money and shares and stuff, the funny thing is you start investing and you keep doing it, and then you get to year 2, and it's not like you've got a calendar reminder set to the 2-year mark of when you first started investing. But like, oh, that's right, I better take it all out now. Money just gives you options, and then the options change as if you don't have a plan or if you don't know why you were doing it. And that's why people put money into a meme stock or whatever, and they go, oh, if it goes from $1 to $4, I'm definitely getting out. And then they don't, because it goes to 5, but then it goes to 4.2 and they're like, oh, well, it was at 5, and then they wait and it's at 3, and then all of a sudden it's at 80 cents.
Yeah, it's like if you invested $1,000 in Apple back in the 90s, you'd be a millionaire now. It's like, nah, you would have sold. Like, you 100% would have sold.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, gents, thank you very much for your time. happy, sorted money month.
Yeah.
Please make sure to follow the rest of Tom, in terms of the rest of Money Month. Where can people go to find out more information?
Yeah, so sorted.org.nz, right from the homepage, it'll get to where you need to go. Have a look for that events calendar to find things near you, and check out the excuse generator right on there so you can make excuses to pause and then sort your stuff.
That might be a fun podcast episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, get out the excuse generator. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, guys. We'll catch you next time.